Hello and welcome to Chapter 11 of Radiating Literature. It's time for another police interview. This one is called Jack Renauld, and it is spelled Jack, not Jacques, so I'm saying Jack. What the next development of the conversation would have been, I cannot say, for at that moment the door was thrown violently open, and a tall young man strode into the room. Just for a moment, I had the uncanny sensation that the dead man had come to life again. Then I realized that this dark head was untouched with gray, and that, in point of fact, it was a mere boy who now burst in among us with so little ceremony. He went straight to Mrs. Renauld with an impetuosity, that was just a rough one for me, that took no heed of the presence of others. "Mother! Jack!" With a cry she folded him in her arms. "My dearest! What brings you here? You were to sail on the Anzora from Cherbourg 2 days ago." You were to sail on Anzora from Cherbourg 2 days ago? It's a question mark, not an exclamation. Okay. Then suddenly recalling to herself the presence of others, she turned with a certain dignity. "My son, messieurs." "Aha!" said Hotet, acknowledging the young man's bow. "So you did not sail on the Anzora?" "No, monsieur. As I was about to explain, the Anzora was detained 24 hours through engine trouble. I should have sailed last night instead of the night before, but, happening to buy an evening paper, I saw in it an account of the awful tragedy that had befallen us." His voice broke and tears came into his eyes. "My poor father! My poor, poor father!" Staring at him like one in a dream, Mrs. Renauld repeated, "So you did not sail?" And then, with a gesture of infinite weariness, she murmured as though to herself, "After all, it does not matter now." "Sit down, Renauld, I beg of you," said Hotet, indicating a chair. "My sympathy for you is profound. It must have been a terrible shock to you to learn the news as you did. However, it is most fortunate that you were prevented from sailing. I am in hopes that you may be able to give us just the information we need to clear up this mystery. I am at your disposal, le juge. Ask me any questions you please. To begin with, I understand that this journey was being undertaken at your father's request?" "Quite so, le juge. I received a telegram bidding me to proceed without delay to Buenos Aires," still spelled wrongly, "and from thence via the Andes to Valparaiso and on to Santiago." "Ah, and the object of this journey?" "I have no idea, le juge." "What?" "No. See, here is the telegram." The magistrate took it and read it aloud. "Proceed immediately, Cherbourg, embark Anzora, sailing tonight Buenos Aires. Ultimate destination Santiago. Further instructions will await you in Buenos Aires. Do not fail. Matters of most importance. Renauld." It's weird to sign a letter to your son Renauld and not dad or father. Okay. And there had been no previous correspondence on the matter? Jack Renauld shook his head. "That is the only intimation of any kind. I knew, of course, that my father, having lived so long out there, had necessarily many interests in South America, but he had never seen that word? Okay. Any suggestion of sending me out. You have, of course, been a good deal in South America, Renauld?" "I was there as a child, but I was educated in England, and I spent most of my holidays in that country, so I really know far less of South America than might be supposed. You see, the war broke out when I was 17. You served in the English Flying Corps, did you not?" "Yes, le juge." Hotet nodded his head and proceeded with his inquiries along the, by now, well-known lines. In response, Jack Renauld declared definitely that he knew nothing of any enmity his father might have incurred in the city of Santiago, or elsewhere in the South American continent, that he had noticed no change in his father's manner of late, and that he had never heard him refer to a secret. He had regarded the mission to South America as connected with business interests. As Hotet paused for a minute, the quiet voice of Gerard broke in. "I would like to put a few questions on my own account, le juge." "By all means, Gerard, if you wish," said the magistrate coldly. Gerard edged his chair a little nearer to the table. "Were you on good terms with your father, Renauld?" "Certainly I was," returned the lad haughtily. "You assert that positively?" "Yes." "No little disputes, eh?" Jacques shrugged his shoulders. "Everyone may have a difference of opinion now and then." "Quite so, quite so. But if anyone were to assert that you had a violent quarrel with your father on the eve of your departure for Paris, that person, without doubt, would be lying. I could not but admire the ingenuity of Gerard. His boast, "I know everything," had been no idle one. Jack Renaud was clearly disconcerted by the question. We did have an argument," he admitted. "Ah, an argument! In the course of that argument did you use the phrase, 'When you are dead, I can do as I please'?" "I may have done," muttered the other. "I don't know." "In response to that, did your father say, 'But I am not dead yet'? To which you responded, 'I wish you were'?" The boy made no answer. His hands fiddled nervously with the things on the table in front of him. This reminds me of 12 Angry Men, which is great. I've seen it as a movie. It's also a play, I know, originally. But there is this moment in it where, like, part of the evidence against the defendant is that they heard him say, like, "I want to kill you," or something like that. And one of the jurors provokes another into saying the same thing. And he's like, "Well, you don't really mean that, do you?" And that's exactly the point. Quite often when people say, like, "I wish you were dead," or "I want to kill you," it's not actually an admission of those things. It's this extreme moment of frustration and anger, not like a legitimate wish or plan. Anyways. The boy made no oh yeah, I said that. Okay. "I must request an answer, please, Renaud," said Gerard sharply. With an angry exclamation, the boy swept a heavy paper knife on the floor. "What does it matter? You might as well know. Yes, I did quarrel with my father. I dare say I said all those things. I was so angry I cannot even remember what I said. I was furious. I could have killed him at that moment." Okay, that's a bad thing to say. "There, make the most of that." He leaned back in his chair, flushed and defiant. Gerard smiled, then, moving his chair back a little, said, "That is all. You would, without doubt, prefer to continue the interrogatory, le Judge?" It's driving me nuts they don't say interrogation. I hate saying that word. "Ah, yes, exactly," said Hotet. "And what was the subject of your quarrel?" "I decline to state." Hotet sat up in his chair. "Renaud, it is not permitted to trifle with the law," he thundered. "What was the subject of the quarrel?" Young Renaud remained silent, his boyish face sullen and overcast. But another voice spoke, imperturbable. Oh, dear Lord. Imperturbable. That's my best guess. I'm not saying it again. The voice of Hercule. "I will inform you if you like, le Juge." "You know?" "Certainly I know. The subject of the quarrel was Mademoiselle Marthe de Brille." Renaud sprang round, startled. The magistrate leaned forward. "Is that so, monsieur?" Jack Renaud bowed his head. "Yes," he admitted. "I love Mademoiselle de Brille, and I wish to marry her. When I informed my father of the fact, he flew at once into a violent rage. Naturally, I could not stand hearing the girl I love insulted, and I, too, lost my temper." Hotet looked across at Mrs. Renaud. "You were aware of this attachment, madame?" "I feared it," she replied simply. "Mother!" cried the boy. "You too? Marthe, I don't know, is as good as she is beautiful. What can you say against her?" "I have nothing against Mademoiselle de Brille in any way, but I should prefer you to marry an Englishwoman, or if a Frenchwoman, not one who has a mother of doubtful antecedents." Her rancor against the older woman showed plainly in her voice, and I could well understand that it must have been a bitter blow to her when her only son showed signs of falling in love with the daughter of her rival. Mrs. Renaud continued, addressing the magistrate. "I ought, perhaps, to have spoken to my husband on the subject, but I hoped that it was only a boy and girl flirtation, which would blow over all the quicker if no notice was taken of it. I blame myself now for my silence, but my husband, as I told you, had seemed so anxious and careworn, different altogether from his normal self, that I chiefly concerned not to give him any additional worry. I'm going to state again that I think that Madame de Brille's daughter is also the dead guy's daughter, and that's why he was so mad, because it's his son and his daughter who are interested in each other. Anyways, Hotet nodded. "When you informed your father of your intentions towards Mademoiselle de Brille," he resumed, "was he surprised?" "He was completely taken aback. Then he ordered me, peremptorily, to dismiss any such idea from my mind. He would never give his consent to such a marriage. Nettled, I demanded what he had against Mademoiselle de Brille. To that he would give no satisfactory reply, but spoke in slighting terms of the mystery surrounding the lives of mother and daughter. I answered that I was marrying Martha. Martha, I'm going to just say Martha. I'm sorry, guys, it's throwing me off. And not her antecedents. But he shouted me down with a peremptory refusal to discuss the matter in any way. The whole thing must be given up. The injustice and high-handedness of it all maddened me, especially since he himself always seemed to go out of his way to be attentive to the de Brilles, and was always suggesting that they should be asked to the house. I lost my head, and we quarreled in earnest. My father reminded me that I was entirely dependent on him, and it must have been in answer to that I made the remark about doing as I pleased after his death. Poirot interrupted with a quick question. Were you aware, then, of the terms of your father's will? I knew that he had left half his fortune to me, the other half in trust for my mother to come to me after her death, replied the lad. Proceed with your story, said the magistrate. After that we shouted at each other in sheer rage, until I suddenly realized that I was in danger of missing my train to Paris. I had to run for the station, still in a white heat of fury. However, once well away, I calmed down. I wrote to Martha, telling her what had happened, and her reply soothed me still further. She pointed out to me that we had only had to be steadfast, and any opposition was bound to give way at last. Our affection for each other must be tried and proved, and when my parents realized that it was no light infatuation on my part, they would doubtless relent towards us. Of course, to her, I had not dwelt on my father's principal objection to the match. I soon saw that I should do my cause no good by violence. My father wrote me several letters in Paris, affectionate in tone, and which did not refer to our disagreement or its cause, and I replied in the same strain. You can produce those letters, eh? Said Gerard. I did not keep them. No matter, said the detective. Renaud looked at him for a moment, but the magistrate was continuing his questions. To pass to another matter, are you acquainted with the name Duveen, Renaud? Duveen? Said Jack. Duveen? He leaned forward and slowly picked up the paper knife he had swept from the table. As he lifted his head, his eyes met the watching ones of Gerard. Duveen? No, I can't say I am. Will you read this letter, Miss Renaud, and tell me if you have any idea as to who the person was who addressed it to your father? Jack Renaud took the letter and read it through, the color mounting in his face as he did so. Addressed to my father? The emotion and indignation in his tones were evident. Yes, we found it in the pocket of his coat. Does... He hesitated, throwing the merest fraction of a glance toward his mother. The magistrate understood. As yet, no. Can you give us any clue as to the writer? I have no idea whatsoever. Hotet sighed. A most mysterious case. Ah, well, I suppose we can now rule out the letter altogether. What do you think, Gerard? It does not seem to lead us anywhere. It certainly does not, agreed the detective with emphasis. And yet, sighed the magistrate, it promised at the beginning to be such a beautiful and simple case. He caught Mrs. Renaud's eye and blushed in immediate confusion. Ah, yes, he coughed, turning over the paper on the table. Let me see, where were we? Oh, the weapon. I fear this may give you pain, Renaud. I understand it was a present from you to your mother. Very sad, very distressing. Jack Renaud leaned forward. His face, which had flushed during the perusal of the letter, was now deadly white. Do you mean that it was the airplane wire paper cutter that my father was killed? But it's impossible. A little thing like that. Alas, Renaud, it is only too true. An ideal little fool, I fear. Sharp and easy to handle. Where is it? Can I see it? Is it still in the body? Oh no, it has been removed. Would you like to see it, to make sure? It would be as well, perhaps, though Madame has already identified it. Still, Bex, might I trouble you? Certainly, the judge. I will fetch it immediately. Would it not be better to take Renaud to the shed? Suggested Gerard smoothly. Without doubt, he would wish to see his father's body. That's not without doubt. Like if my dad was, stabbed to death in his home, I don't think it would be, after the legalities are taken care of, be like, oh, you know what I want to do? I want to look at his corpse that's been sitting in a shed for a day. Cool. Anyways, the boy made a shivering gesture of negation. Thank you. And the magistrate, always disposed to cross Gerard whenever possible, replied, but no, not at present. Bex will be so kind as to bring it here. The commissary left the room. Stoner crossed to Jack and wrung him by the hand. Poirot had risen and was adjusting a pair of candlesticks that struck his trained eye as being a shade askew. Excuse me. The magistrate was reading the mysterious love letter through a last time, clinging desperately to his first theory of jealousy and a stab in the back. Suddenly the door burst open and the commissary rushed in. Le juge! Le juge! But yes, what is it? The dagger! It is gone! Comment? Gone? Vanished, disappeared. The glass jar that contained it is empty. What? I cried. Impossible. Why, only this morning I saw... The words died on my tongue, but the attention of the entire room was diverted to me. What is that you say? Cried the commissary. This morning? I saw it there this morning, I said slowly. About an hour and a half ago, to be accurate. You were in the shed then? How did you get the key? I asked the Sergeant de Ville for it. And you went there? Why? I hesitated, but in the end I decided the only thing to do was to make a clean breast of it. Never heard that phrase. Le juge, I said, I have committed a grave fault, for which I must crave your indulgence. Ah bien? Proceed, monsieur. The fact of the matter is, I said, wishing myself anywhere else than where I was, that I met a young lady acquainted of mine. She displayed a great desire to see everything that was to be seen, and well, in short, I took the key to show her the body. Ah, par exemple, cried the magistrate indignantly. But it is a great fault that you have committed there, Captain Hastings. It is altogether most irregular. You should have not permitted yourself this folly. I know, I said meekly. Nothing you can say could be too severe, le juge. Say, he could have you arrested. You did not invite this lady to come here? Certainly not. I met her quite by accident. She's an English lady who happens to be staying in Merlinville, though I was not aware of that until my unexpected meeting with her. Well, well, said the magistrate, softening. It is most irregular, but the lady is without doubt young and beautiful, n'est-ce pas? What it is to be young. Oh, je ne sais. Doing my best, guys, with the French. And he sighed sentimentally. But the commissary, less romantic and more practical, took up the tale. But did you not reclose and lock the door when you departed? That's just it, I said slowly. That's what I blame myself for so terribly. My friend was upset at the sight. She nearly fainted. I got her some brandy and water, and afterwards insisted on accompanying her back to town. In the excitement, I forgot to relock the door. I only did so when I got back to the villa. Then for 20 minutes at least, the commissary said slowly. He stopped. Exactly, I said. 20 minutes, mused the commissary. It is deplorable, said Hotet, his sternness of manner returning. Without precedent. Suddenly another voice broke. You find it deplorable, le juge? Asked Gerard. Certainly I do. Ah bien, I find it admirable, said the other imperturbably. Jesus. The unexpected ally quite bewildered me. Admiral, Gerard? Asked the magistrate, studying him cautiously out of the corner of his eye. Precisely. And why? Because we now know that the assassin, or an accomplice of the assassin, has been near the villa only an hour ago. It would be strange if, with that knowledge, we do not shortly lay hands upon him. There was a note of menace in his voice. He continued, he risked a good deal to gain possession of that dagger. Perhaps he feared that fingerprints might be discovered. Poirot turned to Bex. You said there were none. Gerard shrugged his shoulders. Perhaps he could not be sure. Poirot looked at him. You are wrong, Gerard. The assassin wore gloves, so he must have been sure. I do not say it was the assassin himself. It may have been an accomplice, who is not aware of that fact. Oh, this is a lot of French. Ils sont mal résine les complets. That was really my best shot, guys, muttered Poirot. But he said no more. The magistrate's clerk was gathering up the papers on the table. Hotet addressed us. Our work is finished. Perhaps, Renaud, you will listen whilst your evidence is read over to you. I have purposefully kept all the proceedings as informal as possible. I have been called original in my methods, but I maintain that there is much to be said for originality. The case is now in the clever hands of the renowned Gerard. He will without doubt distinguish himself. Indeed, I wonder that he has not already laid his hands upon the murderers. Madame, again, let me assure you of my heartfelt sympathy. Messieurs, I wish you all good day. And, accompanied by his clerk and the commissary, he took his departure. Poirot tugged out the large turnip of a watch of his, and observed the time. Let us return to the hotel for lunch, my friend, he said, and you shall recount to me in full the indiscretions of this morning. No one is observing us. We need make no adieu. We went quietly out of the room. The examining magistrate had just driven off in his car. I was going down the steps when Poirot's voice arrested me. One little moment, my friend. Dexterously, he whipped out his yard measure. He has one? Okay. And proceeded quite solemnly to measure an overcoat hanging in the hall from the collar to the hem. I had not seen it hanging there before, and guessed that it belonged to either Mr. Stoner or Jack Renaud. Then, with a satisfied little grunt, Poirot returned the measure to his pocket and followed me out into the open air. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 11.